Hey guys, Kurgan here. In this video I'm going to be showing you how to use Surrender to Madness after the 7.15 changes. Now the changes did quite a lot to Surrender to Madness. The insanity generation has gone down from 150% to 100%, and what this means is that our void form is going to be a lot shorter than it was before. 3 void torrents, which was before the sort of holy grail of Surrender to Madness, that's now not possible on single target. It's technically possible if you have like 3 to 5 targets that you can dot up with 2-piece and auspicious spirits, but in most situations you're just never ever going to reach 3 void torrents. So that changes kind of our void torrent usage, our dispersion usage, and PI usage, and I'll be going over that in this video. So first off, let's look at the talents. It's the same as it was before. It's Surrender to Madness, Power Infusion, Auspicious Spirits, Reaper of Souls, and Twist of Fate. If you are stacking Mastery and you have very little crit, which is the normal build for Shadow Priests, you can also take SL, but be aware that you're going to be generating less insanity, and it can make things a little tougher. So I would, if you're not very comfortable with Surrender, I would always advise taking Auspicious Spirits. Next, we need to look at stats. Stats play an important role for Surrender to Madness. The real requirement for it to work is to have at least 9 to 10k haste. That's really the bare minimum for you to be able to get a good void form off in Surrender. For the rest of your stats, really Mastery is the best. That will give you the most damage, but crit will help you with your Auspicious Spirit if you take that talent and can make you have a higher void form or make things easier. Don't pay attention too much to my gear because I know it's crit heavy. That's just the gear I have. Ideally I would have a lot more Mastery, but as I said, you must get to 9 to 10k haste, otherwise you're really going to struggle with Surrender at all. Okay, before we start on the Surrender rotation, there's 2 things which are really helpful with Surrender, and those are weak auras. The first weak aura is a weak aura to show your void form stacks. The amount of stacks you have sort of changes your decision making, and it's just good information to have. Also, having a custom weak aura for your insanity bar, ideally the one that I've linked in the description before, helps a lot also to manage it. Okay, now we're going to move on to the rotation for Surrender. Now the way I'm going to do this is that I'm going to show a clip of me doing it on the dummy, and I'm going to explain when you're meant to use abilities and why. The one thing to note is that the clip has me having the legendary belt equipped. What this means is that Mind Blast has 2 charges, but I never use Mind Blast when it's not at 2 charges, which means that effectively it's the same as not having the belt equipped. So don't think I'm cheating in the clip. Okay, so when you start Surrender to Madness, the first thing you want to do when you enter void form depends whether you have 4-piece or not. If you have 4-piece, you want to spam Void Bolt until it goes on cooldown and then use Void Torrent. If you don't have 4-piece, the first thing you should do is cast Void Torrent. And in the clip here, I don't have 4-piece, so I cast Void Torrent as the first thing. Once Void Torrent is over, we just need to revert back to the standard Shadow Priest Void Form rotation, which is Void Bolt on cooldown, then Mind Blast, and then Mind Flay as a filler. Now if you already are in Execute and you have Shadow Word Death charges, you should just avoid letting Shadow Word Death cap out at 2 stacks, so use it at 2 stacks, and you never want to use it in the place of a Void Bolt or Mind Blast at this stage in Surrender. So the rotation would be going something along the lines of Void Bolt, Mind Blast, Shadow Word Death if at 2 stacks, and then Mind Flay to fill it out when Void Bolt and Mind Blast are on cooldown. It is important to know that between 0 to 40 stacks, you will not need Shadow Word Death to stay alive, but past that point, if you're not in Execute, you will die. When using Shadow Word Death, you have to make sure you're never wasting the insanity it generates. If you cap out too much insanity, you're going to end up having to use more Shadow Word deaths, and you're kind of going to fall behind and die earlier than you should. Past 50 stacks of Void Form, this is where the insanity drain really starts becoming very aggressive. This is the first point where if you do screw up and you waste insanity or you miss a global cooldown, you have a very large possibility of dying. Your objective here really is to use your Shadow Word deaths as well as possible and to make it to your next Void Torrent, which should be coming off cooldown very soon. Once your Void Torrent comes off cooldown, you need to assess whether or not you have to use it straight away or not. It's best to delay it for as long as possible, because if you delay it, it means you can cast your PI later, which means more damage. But if you're going to die and you're struggling a bit, you have to cast it. In this clip, you see that I use it almost immediately because I know I have no Shadow Word death charges and I'm already starting to run out of insanity. So if you are in any danger, you should just use it. After Void Torrent, you need to start thinking about using Power Infusion. Now, again, it's very much a similar situation with your Void Torrent. You want to use it to stop yourself from dying, but you want to delay it as much as possible so that you deal more damage. In this clip, I'm able to cast like a Void Bolt and a Mind Blast after the Void Torrent, but I can see that my insanity really is starting to drain and I can't survive for much longer, so I just use it straight away to keep myself alive and not kill myself. When you're in PI, your haste will become so high that your Void Bolt will have a much shorter cooldown. This changes your rotation so that you're essentially casting Void Bolt every other global cooldown. So your rotation becomes Void Bolt, Mind Blast, Void Bolt, and then either Mind Flay or Shadow Word Death. Also, when you're inside PI, you want to now use your Shadow Fiend. Now, the problem with Shadow Fiend is that despite it doing a lot of damage, it also doesn't generate any insanity. So if we use it, we are also in danger of killing ourselves. So the way we want to deal with this is that we want to cast Void Bolt, then Shadow Fiend, and Void Bolt again, followed by a Shadow Word Death. It's very important you have a Shadow Word Death charge up so that you're able to make up for the lost insanity from casting Shadow Fiend. It's also important that you use this earlier on in PI, because later on PI, even though you have the increased insanity generation, the drain will be so aggressive that you still might die even with the Shadow Word Death. Once your Power Infusion finishes, you should be near 90 stacks of Void Form. At this point, the insanity drain is so high, unless you have a near full bar of insanity, you can't cast Mind Blast. So the way your rotation is going to be at this point, it's just going to be Void Bolt, Shadow Word Death, Void Bolt, and if you have another Shadow Word Death, you use it again. If you don't, you just want to cast Dispersion. And you sit into your Dispersion until the end, and then cast Void Bolt again, and if you have any Shadow Word Death up, you cast it then. But at this point, you are most likely just going to die. But that's fine because you've done your damage. So that was a lot to absorb, so I'm going to give a quick summary while also replaying the clip without any pauses in it. So the first thing you want to do when you enter Void Form is either use your 4-piece spamming Void Bolt until it goes on cooldown. If you don't have 4-piece, just use Void Torrent as soon as possible. You want to survive until your second Void Torrent. Between 40 to 60 stacks is when you'll start needing to use Shadow Word Death to keep yourself alive. Before that though, just keep Shadow Word Death from capping at 2 stacks. After your second Void Torrent, you want to delay your Power Infusion as much as possible, but you also want to make sure that you don't die trying to delay it too much. During PI, you want to use your Shadow Fiend relatively early and make sure you have a charge of Shadow Word Death so that you can instantly recover from using it. Once PI has finished, you should then use the rest of your Shadow Word Death charges and then use your Dispersion to delay your death as much as possible. Once you're out of Dispersion, use anything you have to stay alive, but you are going to die pretty much straight after. There are a few things which you can use that can give you an edge in Surrender. The first thing is the crafted necklace for Shadow Priests. This has a non-use that grants you on insanity, and this can be used like as an extra Shadow Word death, either if you screw up early and need something to save yourself, or ideally you use it after the second Void Torrent and before Power Infusion to help you delay that Power Infusion so you can deal more damage by using it later. Also, if you are a Blood Elf, you can use Arcane Torrent very much in the same manner. That sums up everything which I wanted to go over in this guide. Surrender is one of the most difficult abilities to use in the game at the moment, so it really requires a lot of practice. I advise you using a training dummy like this one that loses health and just practicing Surrender as much as possible. It's one of those things that you're never going to get it correct if you try it for the first time in a raid, so it's really important to get that practice in before you do take it to a raid. Despite it being difficult, it is also one of the most rewarding things to do, so I really hope that you do try it out and have a lot of fun with it. Anyway, thank you for watching, and please like the video if you found it useful. See you guys.